Mahavira. Mahavira, also known as Vardhamāna, was the 24th tirthankara who revived Jainism. In the Jain tradition, it is believed that Mahavira was born in the early part of the 6th century BC into a royal Kshatriya family in present-day Bihar, India. He abandoned all worldly possessions at the age of 30 and left home in pursuit of spiritual awakening, becoming an ascetic. Mahavira practiced intense meditation and severe austerities for 12 years, after which he is believed to have attained Kevala Jnana. He preached for 30 years and is believed by Jains to have died in the 6th century BC, although the year varies by sect. Scholars such as Karl Potter consider his biography uncertain. Some suggest that he lived in the 5th century BC, contemporaneously with the Buddha. Mahavira attained nirvana at the age of 72, and his body was cremated. After attaining Kevala Jnana, Mahavira taught that observance of the vows of ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, and aparigraha is necessary for spiritual liberation. He taught the principles of Anekantavada, Syudvada and Nyayavada. Mahavira's teachings were compiled by Indrabhuti Gautama as the Jain Agamas. The texts, transmitted orally by Jain monks, are believed to have been largely lost by about the 1st century. The surviving versions of the Agamas taught by Mahavira are some of Jainism's foundation texts. Mahavira is usually depicted in a sitting or standing meditative posture, with the symbol of a lion beneath him. His earliest iconography is from archaeological sites in the North Indian city of Mathura, and is dated from the 1st century BC to the 2nd century AD. His birth is celebrated as Mahavir Jayanti, and his nirvana is observed by Jains as Diwali. Surviving early Jain and Buddhist literature uses several names for Mahavira, including Nayaputa, Muni, Samama, Nigantha, Brahman, and Bhagavan. In early Buddhist suttas, he is referred to as Araha and Vayavi. He is known as Sramana in the Kalpastri, devoid of love and hate. According to later Jain texts, Mahavira's childhood name was Vardhamāna because of the kingdom's prosperity at the time of his birth. According to the Kalpasutras, he was called Mahavira by the gods in the Kalpastra because he remained steadfast in the midst of dangers, fears, hardships, and calamities. He is also known as a tirthankara. Although it is universally accepted by scholars of Jainism that Mahavira lived in ancient India, the details of his life and the year of his birth are subjects of debate. According to the Digambara Uttara Purana text, Mahavira was born in Kundpur in the kingdom of the Videhas. The Vitambara Kalpastra uses the name Kundagrama, said to be located in present-day Bihar, India. Although it is thought to be the town of Basukund, about 60 kilometers north of Putna, his birthplace remains a subject of dispute. Mahavira renounced his material wealth and left home when he was 28, by some accounts, lived an ascetic life for 12 years and then preached Jainism for 30 years. Where he preached has been a subject of disagreement between the two major traditions of Jainism, the Vitambaras and the Digambaras. The Vitambara tradition believes that Mahavira was born in 599 BC and died in 527 BC, and the Digambara tradition believes that he died in 510 BC. The controversy arises from efforts to date him and the Buddha. According to Buddhist and Jain texts, they are believed to have been contemporaries, and much ancient Buddhist literature has survived. Almost all Indologists and historians, says Paul Dundas and others, date Mahavira's birth at about 497 BC and his death at about 425 BC. However, the Viranirvana Samvat era began in 527 BC and is a firmly established part of Jain tradition. The 12th century Jain scholar Hemachandra placed Mahavira in the 5th century BC. Kailash Jain writes that Hemachandra performed an incorrect analysis, which along has been a source of confusion and controversy about Mahavira's nirvana. According to Jain, the traditional date of 527 BC is accurate. The Buddha was younger than Mahavira and might have attained nirvana a few years later. The place of his nirvana, Pavapuri in present-day Bihar, is a pilgrimage site for Jains. According to Jain cosmology, 24 tirthankaras have appeared on earth. Mahavira was the last tirthankara of Avasarpi. A tirthankara signifies the founding of a tirtha, a passage across the sea of birth and death cycles. A member of the Kashyapa Gotra, Mahavira was born into the royal Kshatriya family of King Siddhartha and Queen Trishala of the Ikshvaku dynasty. This is the dynasty in which Hindu epics place Rama and the Ramayana, Buddhist texts place the Buddha, and the Jains attribute another 21 of their 24 tirthankaras. According to Digambara Jains, Mahavira was born in 540 BC, Svetambara texts state that he was born in 599 BC. His birthday falls on the 13th day of the rising moon in the month of Kshatriya in the Viranirvana Samvat calendar era. It falls in March or April of the Gregorian calendar, and is celebrated by Jains as Mahavir Jayanti. Kundagrama is traditionally believed to be near Vaishali, an ancient town on the Indo-Gangetic plain. Its location in present-day Bihar is unclear, partly because of migrations from ancient Bihar for economic and political reasons. According to the universal history in Jain mythology, Mahavira underwent many rebirths before his 6th century birth. They included a denizen of hell, a lion, and a god in a heavenly realm just before his last birth as the 24th tirthankara. Svetambara texts state that his embryo first formed in a Brahmin woman before it was transferred by Harinagamesan to the womb of Trishala, Siddhartha's wife. The embryo transfer legend is not believed by adherents of the Digambara tradition. Jain texts state that after Mahavira was born, the god Indra came from the heavens along with 56 Dipkumaris, anointed him, and performed his abhisheka on Mount Meru. These events, illustrated in a number of Jain temples, play a part in modern Jain temple rituals. Although the Kalpastra accounts of Mahavira's birth legends are recited by Svetambara Jains during the annual Paryashana festival, the same festival is observed by the Digambaras without the recitation. Mahavira grew up as a prince. According to the second chapter of the Vitambara Acharanga Sutra, his parents were lay devotees of Parshvanatha. Jain traditions differ about whether Mahavira married. The Digambara tradition believes that his parents wanted him to marry Yashoda, but he refused to marry. The Vitambara tradition believes that he was married to Yashoda at a young age and had one daughter, Priyadarshana, also called Anujaja. Jain texts portray Mahavira as tall. His height was given as 7 cubits in the Apapatika Sutra. In Jain mythology, he was the shortest of the 24 tirthankaras. Earlier teachers were believed to have been taller, with Aristonemi, the 22nd tirthankara, who lived for 1,000 years, said to have been 40 cubits in height. At age 30, Mahavira abandoned royal life and left his home and family to live an ascetic life in the pursuit of spiritual awakening. He undertook severe fasts and bodily mortifications, meditated under the Ashoka tree, and discarded his clothes. The Acharanga Sutra has a graphic description of his hardships and self-mortification. According to the Kalpastra, Mahavira spent the first 42 monsoons of his life in Astikagrama, Kampapuri, Parstikampa, Vaishali, Vanajagrama, Nalanda, Mithila, Badrika, Alabhika, Panatabhumi, Shravasti, and Pawapuri. He is said to have lived in Rajagriha during the rainy season of the 41st year of his ascetic life, which is traditionally dated to 491 BC. According to traditional accounts, Mahavira achieved Kevala Jnana under a sla tree on the bank of the river Rijapalika near Jairimhikagrama at age 43 after 12 years of rigorous penance. The details of the event are described in the Jain Uttarpara and Haivamsapara texts. The Acharanga Sutra describes Mahavira as all-seeing. The Sutra Kritanga expands it to all-knowing, and describes his other qualities. Jains believe that Mahavira had a most auspicious body and was free from 18 imperfections when he attained omniscience. According to the Vitambara, he travelled throughout India to teach his philosophy for 30 years after attaining omniscience. However, the Digambara believe that he remained in his Samavasarana and delivered sermons to his followers. Jain texts document that Mahavira's first disciples were 11 Brahmins, traditionally known as the 11 Ganadharas. Gautama was their leader, and the others were Agnabhuti, Vayabhuti, Akampita, Aryavayakta, Sudharman, Manditaputra, Mauryaputra, Akalabhaitrata, Maitreya, and Prabhasa. Gautama is said to have appointed Sudarman his successor. The Ganadharas remembered and verbally transmitted Mahavira's teachings after his death. His teachings became known as Ganipataka, or the Jain Agamas. According to Jain tradition, Mahavira had 14,000 muni, 36,000 aryaka, 159,000 sravakas, and 318,000 sravakas. Royal followers included King Srenika of Magadha, Kunika of Anga and Chitaka of Videha. Mahavira initiated his mendicants with the Mahavratas. He delivered 55 pravachana and a set of lectures. He preached, and died at the age of 72. The Jain Vitambara tradition believes that Mahavira's death occurred in 527 BC, and the Digambara tradition holds that he died in 468 BC. In both traditions, his jiva is believed to abide in Siddhashala. According to Jain texts, Mahavira's nirvana occurred in the town of Pawapuri in present-day Bihar. His life as a spiritual light and the night of his nirvana are commemorated by Jains as Diwali at the same time that Hindus celebrate their festival of lights. His chief disciple, Gautama, is said to have attained omniscience the night that Mahavira died. Accounts of Mahavira's death vary among Jain texts, with some describing a simple death and others recounting grandiose celebrations attended by gods and kings. According to the Jainisna's Mahapurana, heavenly beings arrived to perform his funeral rites. The Pravachanasara says that only the nails and hair of tirthankaras are left behind, the rest of the body dissolves in the air like camphor. In some texts Mahavira is described, at age 72, as delivering his final preaching over a 6-day period to a large group of people. The crowd falls asleep, awakening to find that he has disappeared. Mahavira's Jal Mandir stands at the place where he attained nirvana. Artworks in Jain temples and texts depict his final liberation and cremation, sometimes shown symbolically as a small pyre of sandalwood and a piece of burning camphor. Mahavira's previous births are recounted in Jain texts such as the Mahapurana and Trishashti Shalaka Purusha Charitra. Although a soul undergoes countless reincarnations in the transmigratory cycle of Sasra, the birth of a tirthankara is reckoned from the time he determines the causes of karma and pursues Ratnatraya. Jain texts describe Mahavira's 26 births before his incarnation as a tirthankara. According to the texts, he was born as Marishi in a previous life. Yadavabha Tiloyapati recounts nearly all the events of Mahavira's life in a form convenient for memorization. Jainisna's Mahapurana was completed by his disciple, Gunabhadra, in the 8th century. In the Uttarapura, Mahavira's life is described in 3 parvans or sections and 1818 verses. Vardhamāna is a Sanskrit Kavya poem, written by Asaga in 853, which narrates the life of Mahavira. The Kalpastra is a collection of biographies of tirthankaras, notably Parshvanatha and Mahavira. Samavayanga Sutra is a collection of Mahavira's teachings, and the Acharanga Sutra recounts his asceticism. Colonial-era Indologists considered Jainism a sect of Buddhism because of superficial similarities in iconography and meditative and ascetic practices. As scholarship progressed, differences between the teachings of Mahavira and the Buddha were found so divergent that the religions were acknowledged as separate. Mahavira, says Maurice Winternitz, taught a very elaborate belief in the soul. His ascetic teachings have a higher order of magnitude than those of Buddhism or Hinduism, and his emphasis on ahimsa is greater than that in other Indian religions. Mahavira's teachings were compiled by Gautama Swami, his Ganadhara. The canonical scriptures are in 12 parts. Mahavira's teachings were gradually lost after about 300 BC, according to Jain tradition, when a severe famine in the Magadha kingdom dispersed the Jain monks. Attempts were made by later monks to gather, recite the canon, and re-establish it. These efforts identified differences in recitations of Mahavira's teachings, and an attempt was made in the 5th century AD to reconcile the differences. The reconciliation efforts failed, with Svetambara and Digambara Jain traditions holding their own incomplete, somewhat different versions of Mahavira's teachings. In the early centuries of the Common Era, Jain texts containing Mahavira's teachings were written in palm leaf manuscripts. According to the Digambaras, Kriya Buddha Bailai was the last ascetic with partial knowledge of the original canon. Later, some learned Kriya's restored, compiled, and wrote down the teachings of Mahavira, which were the subjects of the Agamas. Kriya Dharasena, in the 1st century CE, guided the Kriyas Pushpadant and Buddha Bailai as they wrote down the teachings. The two Kriyas wrote Akagama, among the oldest known Digambara texts, on palm leaves. The Jain Agamas enumerate 5 vredas which ascetics and householders must observe. These ethical principles were preached by Mahavira. The goal of these principles is to achieve spiritual peace, a better rebirth, or liberation. According to Chakravarthi, these teachings help improve a person's quality of life. However, Dundas writes that Mahavira's emphasis on non-violence and restraint has been interpreted by some Jain scholars to not be driven by merit from giving or compassion to other creatures, nor a duty to rescue all creatures, but by continual self-discipline, a cleansing of the soul which leads to spiritual development and release. Mahavira is best remembered in the Indian traditions for his teaching that ahimsa is the supreme moral virtue. He taught that ahimsa covers all living beings, and injuring any being in any form creates bad karma, which affects one's rebirth, future well-being, and suffering. According to Mahatma Gandhi, Mahavira was the greatest authority on ahimsa. Mahavira taught that the soul exists, a premise shared with Hinduism but not Buddhism. There is no soul in Buddhism, and its teachings are based on the concept of anatta. Mahavira taught that the soul is dravya, eternal, and yet impermanent. To Mahavira, the metaphysical nature of the universe consists of dravya, jiva, and ajiva. The jiva is bound to sasra because of karma. Karma, in Jainism, includes actions and intent. It colors the soul, affecting how, where, and as what a soul is reborn after death. According to Mahavira, there is no creator deity and existence has neither beginning nor end. Gods and demons exist in Jainism, however, whose jiva is a part of the same cycle of birth and death. The goal of spiritual practice is to liberate the jiva from its karmic accumulation and enter the realm of the siddhas, souls who are liberated from rebirth. Enlightenment, to Mahavira, is the consequence of self-cultivation and self-restraint. Mahavira taught the doctrine of Anekantavada. Although the word does not appear in the earliest Jain literature or the Agamas, but the doctrine is illustrated in Mahavira's answers to questions posed by his followers. Truth and reality are complex, and have a number of aspects. Reality can be experienced, but it is impossible to express it fully with language alone. Human attempts to communicate are nayas. Language itself is not truth, but a means of expressing it. From truth, according to Mahavira, language returns, not the other way around. One can experience the truth of a taste, but cannot fully express that taste through language. Any attempt to express the experience is sya with macron t, valid in some respect, but still perhaps, just one perspective, incomplete. Spiritual truths are also complex, with multiple aspects, and language cannot express their plurality. However, they can be experienced through effort and appropriate karma. Mahavira's Anekantavada doctrine is also summarized in Buddhist texts such as the Samanaphala Sutta, and is a key difference between the teachings of Mahavira and those of the Buddha. The Buddha taught the middle way, rejecting the extremes of it is or it is not. Mahavira accepted both it is and it is not, with reconciliation and the qualification of perhaps. The Jain Agamas suggest that Mahavira's approach to answering metaphysical, philosophical questions was a qualified yes. A version of this doctrine is also found in the Ajivika school of ancient Indian philosophy. According to Dundas, the Anekantavada doctrine has been interpreted by many Jains as pramada, universal religious tolerance, plurality, benign attitude to other positions. However, this misreads Jain historical texts and Mahavira's teachings. Mahavira's many-pointedness, multiple perspective teachings are a doctrine about the nature of reality and human existence, not about tolerating religious positions such as sacrificing animals or violence against non-believers as perhaps right. The 5 vows for Jain monks and nuns are strict requirements, with no perhaps. Mahavira's Jainism coexisted with Buddhism and Hinduism beyond the renunciant Jain communities, but each religion was highly critical of the knowledge systems and ideologies of their rivals. An historically contentious view in Jainism is partially attributed to Mahavira and his ascetic life. He did not wear clothing, as a sign of renunciation. It was disputed whether a female mendicant could achieve the spiritual liberation of a male mendicant through asceticism. The major Jain traditions have disagreed, with Digambaras believing that a woman is unable to fully practice asceticism and cannot achieve spiritual liberation because of her gender. She can, at best, live an ethical life, so she is reborn as a man. According to this view, women are seen as a threat to a monk's chastity. The clothes-wearing Svetambaras have interpreted Mahavira's teaching as encouraging both sexes to pursue a mendicant, ascetic life with the possibility of moksha. Rebirth and realms of existence are fundamental teachings of Mahavira. According to the Akaranga Sutra, Mahavira believed that life existed in myriad forms which included animals, plants, insects, bodies of water, fire, and wind. He taught that a monk should avoid touching or disturbing any of them and never swim, light a fire, or wave their arms in the air. Such actions might injure other beings living in those states of matter. Mahavira preached that the nature of existence is cyclic, and the soul is reborn after death in one of the trilok, the heavenly, hellish, or earthly realms of existence and suffering. Humans are reborn, depending on one's karma as a human, animal, element, microbe, or other form, on earth or in a heavenly realm. Nothing is permanent, everyone dies and is reborn, based on their actions in their previous life. Jainas who have reached Kevala Jnana are not reborn, they enter the Siddhaloka, the realm of the perfected ones. Mahavira has been erroneously called the founder of Jainism. Jains believe that there were 23 teachers before him, and Jainism was founded well before Mahavira is believed to have been born 84,000 years before the 23rd Tirthankara, Parshvanatha. Although Mahavira is sometimes placed in Parshvanatha's lineage, this is contradicted by texts stating that Mahavira renounced the world alone. Jain texts suggest that Mahavira's parents were lay devotees of Parshvanatha. The lack of detail and the mythical nature of legends about Parshvanatha, combined with medieval-era Svetambara texts portraying Parsvites as pseudo-ascetics with dubious practices of magic and astrology, have led scholars to debate the evidence of Parshvanatha's historicity. According to Dundas, Jains believe that Parshvanatha's lineage influenced Mahavira. Parshvanatha, as the one who removes obstacles and has the capacity to save, is a popular icon. His image is the focus of Jain temple devotion. Of the 24 tirthankaras, Jain iconography has celebrated Mahavira and Parshvanatha the most. Sculptures discovered at the Mathura archaeological site have been dated to the 1st century BCE. According to Maurice Winternitz, Mahavira may be considered a reformer of an existing Jainist sect known as Niganthas, which was mentioned in early Buddhist texts. Two major annual Jain festivals associated with Mahavira are Mahavir Jayanti and Diwali. During Mahavir Jayanti, Jains celebrate Mahavira's birth as the 24th and last Tirthankara of Avasarpi. During Mahavir Jayanti, the 5 auspicious events of Mahavira's life are reenacted. Diwali commemorates the anniversary of Mahavira's nirvana, and is celebrated at the same time as the Hindu festival. Diwali marks the new year for Jains. Samantabhadra's Svayam Hustotra praises the 24 Tirthankaras, and its 8 shlokas adore Mahavira. One such shloka reads: "mw parser output template quote overflow hidden, margin 1 m0, padding 0. 40px.mw parser output template quote height line height 1.5 m, text align left, padding left 1.6 m, margin top 0. O Lord Jina, your doctrine that expounds essential attributes required of a potential aspirant to cross over the ocean of worldly existence reigns supreme even in this strife-ridden spoke of time. Accomplished sages who have invalidated the so-called deities that are famous in the world, and have made ineffective the whip of all blemishes, adore your doctrine." Samantabhadra's Yudhyanusasana is a 64-verse poem which also praises Mahavira. Mahavira's teachings were influential. According to Rabindranath Tagore, Mahavira proclaimed in India that religion is a reality and not a mere social convention. It is really true that salvation cannot be had by merely observing external ceremonies. Religion cannot make any difference between man and man. An event associated with the 2500th anniversary of Mahavira's nirvana was held in 1974. Probably few people in the West are aware that during this anniversary year, for the first time in their long history, the mendicants of the Vitambara, Digambara and Snikaf sects assembled on the same platform, agreed upon a common flag and emblem, and resolved to bring about the unity of the community. For the duration of the year, 4 dharmakakras, a wheel mounted on a chariot as an ancient symbol of the Samavasara of Tirthankara Mahavira, traversed to all the major cities of India, winning legal sanctions from various state governments against the slaughter of animals for sacrifice or other religious purposes, a campaign which has been a major preoccupation of the Jainas throughout their history. Mahavira is usually depicted in a sitting meditative pose, with a lion symbol beneath him. Each tirthankara has a distinct emblem, which allows worshippers to distinguish similar idols. Mahavira's lion emblem is usually carved below his legs. Like all tirthankaras, he is depicted with a shrivatsa and downcast eyes. Mahavira's earliest iconography is from archaeological sites in the North Indian city of Mathura, dated from the 1st century BC to the 2nd century AD. The Srivatsa mark on his chest and his Dhyanamudra posture appears in Kushana Empire-era artwork. Differences in Mahavira's depiction between the Digambara and Svetambara traditions appear in the late 5th century AD. According to John Court, the earliest archaeological evidence of Jaina iconography with inscriptions precedes its datable texts by over 250 years. Many images of Mahavira have been dated to the 12th century and earlier. An ancient sculpture was found in a cave in Sundarajapuram, Theni district, Tamil Nadu. Kayajitha Das, a Jain scholar in Chennai, dated it to the 9th century. Rock-cut sculpture of Mahavira in Samanar Hills, Madurai, Tamil Nadu. Tallest known image of the seated Mahavira. Four-sided sculpture of Mahavira in Kankalaitila, Mathura. Tirthankaras Rishabhanatha and Mahavira, 11th century. Temple relief of Mahavira, 14th century. Relief of Mahavira in Thirakoil, Tamil Nadu. 16-foot, 2-inch stone statue of Mahavira in Ahansasthal, Murali, New Delhi. Mahavira statue in Cave 32 of the Ellora Caves. According to John Court, the Mahavira temple in Osian, Jodhpur, Rajasthan is the oldest surviving Jain temple in western India. It was built in the late 8th century. Other Mahavira temples include Temple in Gajpanth, Jain Temple, Lakundi, Sri Mahavirji Temple, Sankayata, Karnataka. Quotations related to Mahavira at Wikiquote.